I will let Jeff introduce his panelists, who I also thank for being with us today, because some of them have already given some oral history at last year's Washington Historical Studies Conference. It was wonderful then. I know it will be wonderful now. So please join me in welcoming Jeff Krulek.
Much, and it's really nice that you're all out here on such a warm day, and of course with the soccer match, and so I really appreciate you coming here. This is a very important opportunity to hear firsthand some oral history of the Washington culture and landscape that I really cherish. I'm a lifelong Washingtonian. I grew up in Bowie, Maryland, but I've always had a deep interest in Washington culture, and so one part of that are, of course, all the great bars and restaurants and nightclubs that have dotted
the music. The music's kind of a distraction.
Actually,
can we kill the music? Or?
Oh yeah,
it's getting in the way.
I don't know, Yvonne or Karen. Yeah.
Oh no!
Is that who's
Maybe something's on here.
No, I don't know if that was for the screen there. I think maybe
Everybody lean to your left.
Okay, we'll start. Yeah, that didn't work. Can we? I don't know if I'll talk real loud, pretend it's not playing, and then of course we will get that turned off. This is again what we did. This is an encore of a presentation that was done for the DC Historical Studies Conference in this past November. If you were fortunate enough to be there, you saw how much fun it was. And what I was at the time, we had panelists, and we were looking at the photographs of Emil Press, his a wonderful collection, which I'll tell you more about in a moment. But first, I would like to ask each one of my panelists to introduce themselves and explain why this is important for them too to participate. And we're going to start here with Vance Garnett on the right. Does that work? Will that come off? In the meantime, I'm going to try to find Yvonne and get that turned down. Okay, thank you.
All right. My name is Vance Garnett. I'm an often published writer in the Washington Post. I've written. In fact, I hold the record for the most letters published in the Washington Post. There's no official tabulation of that. But very good. Anyway, I was a singer in Washington, D.C. back in the 50s and 60s, and I just know the area, know the nightclub scene so well that when Jeff asked me to participate back in November in that program, I jumped at the opportunity, and I'm glad to be back here again to share some reminiscences, and that's all it's about really today. And I think many of you will have as much to say today as I will.
Will the rest of you turn your cell phones off too? I'm Mike Baker. Jeff found me. I'm a contributor to an email list. When people that's focused on music, it started with the old Twist and Shout Club in Bethesda. And when the people had mentioned something that went on in the old days, I came to write a whole bunch of stuff about it. But I grew up in the DC area. I grew up in Hyattsville. I learned how to use the Branchville line back in the early 50s, and just hung out in DC. And I got into the music part of it. I used to go to baseball games at Griffith Stadium, which was in the heart of what they call the Black Downtown. And I discovered Waxy Maxie's Quality Music Store, very first one. And one night, it was between the 9th grade and the 10th grade, I went to a ball game, and I looked across the street at the Howard Theater, and Joe Turner was playing. I thought, well, okay, baseball can wait. And when I saw Joe Turner, only white guy in the audience, and I was really white too. My hair was orange, my skin was that pale Irish skin, and I got hooked from then on. So I've just spent so much of my life the time going to music and things, and I just fell in love with the DC music scene.
My name is Mark Zeidelman. My father was Harry Zeidelman, one of the partners in Bassin's Restaurant at 14th and Pennsylvania Avenue. Bassin's Restaurant started in 1939 as a delicatessen with 10-cent corned beef sandwiches and nickel cokes and 10-cent hot dogs. It ended up growing through the 70s and primarily in the 60s with the first sidewalk cafe in Washington, D.C. My father spearheaded the legislation through the Congress at that time, along with some help of some congressmen, in order to get outside dining and later to be able to have alcohol on the sidewalk cafes. Bassin's Corner, as it was known, was comprised of 7 different, distinctly different rooms, from the sidewalk cafe to a nightclub upstairs to a dark bar downstairs. One of the rooms, the Escapade, featured Jerry White as the piano player, honky-tonk piano player for many, many years. There was a cafeteria in there as well that would cater to the tour buses that came along. I actually started working there when I was about 5 years old. He would take us down to do whatever didn't get you tips, because we weren't allowed to take money away from the waiters and the waitresses. But we would work in the kitchen, we would count the money from the night before and do some banking, and actually even run the cash register when we were young. My brother did this along with me. Bassin's Restaurant was featured in several books as the president's, now they call Domino Pizza, but back then when there was a crisis at the White House, they would send the Bassins for corned beef sandwiches. That's how you knew something was going on at the White House. I have brought several photos and pictures. My father, unbeknownst to me, was a scrapbooker, and he kept virtually every article that went in the paper. I have photographs back from the 30s, of which I brought some up here, and I'd love for you all to look at. But very pleased to be here, and Jeff, thank you for inviting me. This is a huge part of the legacy. One thing I would like to reflect is, why am I not in the restaurant business if it was so glamorous? Well, it turns out that after I graduated from college, came out of college ready to go in, I showed up one day, and my father said, "That's terrific. I'm glad you're going to be in the business, but go see Manny up on F Street." And I'm saying, "Who is Manny?" He says, "It's my friend in the medical supply business." And I said, "Well, why do I need anything for medical supply?" He says, "I want you to buy a pair of crutches." I'm dancing just fine. And I said, "Why do I need crutches?" And he said, "Because if you go in this business, I'm going to break both of your arms." So from all the glamour and everything that we see, it's a tough life. I'm very grateful that he did it. I'm very pleased for the legacy.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Mendelson. My father owned the famous Benny's Rebel Room on 14th and I Street, not far from Bassin's. In fact, I used to go down here and steal drinks off their outside tables when I was a kid. My father was a very unusual man. He lived a full and exciting life. Before he went into the bar business, he was a taxi cab driver. And he used to take these long hauls down to camp, down to Quantico and so forth. And then he and a couple other people, after they saved enough money to open it, was called Benny's Tavern. It was a long, narrow place. It had the longest bar in Washington. It was over 100 feet long. And we used to sell 10-cent beers. And he decided he wanted to get bigger. So we bought the place next door. We made it twice as big, 3 times as big actually, and put in a dance floor. And all the Marines used to come up from Quantico. In fact, so many of them came up that they had a special bus, would come up on Friday and go back on Sunday with all the drunks. They couldn't make it back in the cab. One of the funny stories that I remember was that when the Korean War started, the Marines, they used to come in there, they were all sent to Korea, And right on the front line, they had a sandbag hooch, like a little fortress, and they had made a sign, Benny's Rebel Room Annex. And it was on the front pages of the paper. And boy, he was unusual. I would work there ever since I was a kid. They used to put a couple telephone books on a bar stool so I could reach the Jewish piano, the cash register. And I remember one winter, it was snowing so bad that all the cars were stopped on Pennsylvania Avenue, the streetcars were stopped, everybody just had to leave their vehicles. And we had a piano player. And my father says, let's have some excitement. I got to get some customers in here with this lousy weather. So he took a couple of the bouncers, and he took the piano and put it on the streetcar platform, right on 14th Street, with a beer, and the piano player had mittens on. And he was banging away at that piano, drinking beer, and that was on the front page. But it was quite a place. At 10 o'clock, they used to cut off the beer. My father said, let's cut off the beer and just sell liquor. Well, that's strictly against the law. But he said, ran out of beer. We went through 150 cases of beer a week, even cutting them off at 10 o'clock. We served nothing but whiskey. If you walked out sober, then there was something wrong. And if you didn't have a bar fight, something was wrong. We paid the bouncers $10 a night. And if they got into a fight, we'd pay them $15. It was just the way things were. The area was great. We had some competitors, Rand's, the owner, I'm sorry I couldn't make it today, and I were very good friends. The Hayloft, I don't know whether you people remember that, but right after the riots, things changed. So father sold that, and he told me not to go into business. But I was just like my father, I didn't listen to anybody. So I opened a bar in Southeast called the Skylark. That lasted exactly 1 year until I had a big enough fight and they tore everything apart. Tore the plumbing out of the walls, threw the piano through the window with the piano player. And the next day, I gave the keys back to the owner. I said, adios. My neighbor was the one that owned Jumbo Foods. Does anybody here remember Jumbo Foods? You know what it is today? Shoppers Food Warehouse. Yeah, nice guys. Anyway, that's the way I grew up, and my father, when he retired, he says, I came up from, he was born in Atlanta, Georgia. He said, I came up on a mule and left in a Cadillac. So, and that was the truth. And that's the story of Benny. That's one of the many stories of Benny's Rebel Room. I got plenty of them.
John's next.
I'm going to try. Was that a microphone? Sure. Yeah. If you can't hear me, let me know. My name is John Pagonis, and I was a reporter for the Washington Post and had a column called On the Town. The Post had two other people, Paul Hume, who covered classical music, and Dick Coe, who covered theater and movies. And I had everything else. The nightlife, plus I was a restaurant critic. When I went to the editor and asked him what my mandate was, he said, anything you want to, just make it interesting. At that time, I have to tell you, the Post had the best bunch of people I ever saw and had a great editor, which helped me out a great deal. I think at that time, this is my personal opinion, that Washington was a more romantic time. People went out maybe more than they did now, and I'm not sure about that, but one of the reasons they went out was television was in its infancy. Now there's television to stay home, you watch movies. Television was in its infancy. The program was infantile, and I mean infantile. What was there to see on television?
Test pattern.
One was Fred Waring and his orchestra. Lots of fun to watch for an hour. Another one was roller skating, which is a big deal. And one of my neighbors happens to be a roller skater who was part of that era. And another one was Dance-a-thon, where people danced until they couldn't dance anymore. They had frequent or infrequent bathroom breaks, but they couldn't eat or drink. And people watched this on television. Well, of course, people went out, and they went to restaurants, and they went to clubs, bars, lounges, supper clubs. The restaurant scene was much different from now. There were very few ethnic restaurants the way there is now. There's more ethnic restaurants on 18th Street in Adams, Oregon than there was then completely. The only ethnics really were Chinese, Italians, and Greeks. And Jewish restaurants, delis. Many of those places became, in addition, clubs. Many of them had dancing. People liked to dance in those days. And when I mean dancing, I mean they held each other. They weren't a half a mile away dancing. They were dancing closely. Many of the restaurants had postage stamp places to dance on. In these restaurants, as in Bassin's, they had all kinds of entertainment. The first entertainment really was what I was interested in personally, and I sort of forced it to the newspaper's audience. I like jazz. There was lots of jazz. Next wave was folk music. Folk music became a big deal, And Bassin's brought in folk music at one point, as I recall. And then after that came rock. Rock was a big thing. I never understood rock, so I never touched it. The restaurants had comics. For instance, there was a restaurant called the Lotus Club, which served food, and they also had other entertainment. One of their big entertainers, the biggest one he ever had, was Nat King Cole. The place was so crowded, they put tables in the aisles. People were standing up. People were calling in to get in to stand up. It was incredible. Very exciting night. Another act they had there, if you could call it an act, was Joe Louis, famous boxer. Well, this is sort of interesting. Many people who once had fame, after they left their discipline, they came into nightclubs. What did Joe Louis do? He talked about boxing. Another boring thing. Probably the biggest, most famous supper club in Washington was the Shorehams Blue Room. The Shoreham Hotel Blue Room was on the edge of a forest, hill, forest? Park. I'm sorry, park, thank you, a park. And they had a wonderful room. They had an orchestra, Bob Cross, 18-member orchestra, who played for dancing, and people really danced. They had a good menu, and they had probably the most famous array of entertainers that the city ever had. Bob Cross played for dancing. People loved to dance. And he also played for the entertainers. Who were the entertainers? Well, one is, as I told you, when the people leave their disciplines, they come in to nightclubs. Nelson Eddy. Another one was Van Johnson, who, when he got washed up in the movies, came there. And what did Van Johnson do? There was a song called 96 trombones? 76 trombones, right. He went around the aisles with a trombone, and people were following him, including people from the audience. He had lots of people there. One of the luminaries there was Marlene Dietrich, who rarely went to nightclubs. This was a shy woman. And she did her act. She was a very good singer. Terrific looking woman for her age. Terrific looking. a wonderful dresser. Before the act, the Shoreham had a press conference, and they roped off the foyer, which was enormous, and had to be 2,000 reporters, mostly women, who went to her to ask her about her clothes, about her makeup, and God knows what else. I talked to her simply by, after so much people coming up to her, I sneaked over to her and I said, "Excuse me, but I heard that you were a good friend of Hemingway's, and that when he was taking a bath you would talk to him," which happened to be true. I had read that. And she grabbed hold of me. She says, "My God, you're the first person not to talk about clothes. I want you to come to dinner with me." In those days, when I went to dinner, I went home to my wife because my job was 6:30 to 3 in the morning. So I called up my wife and told her I wasn't sure I could come home because Marlena Dietrich asked me to go to dinner. She said, "You damn fool, go to dinner." And I did. Well, it was a dinner in which there were 12 people, and I was at the end of the table, and I never said a word to her. I couldn't. But what she did was, apparently the only thing she drank was Heineken's beer. The owner of the restaurant, which is the Rive Gauche, which is a plum restaurant in those days, that's where she had the dinner, not at the Shoreham. When he knew she was coming, he called all of his friends to come, and they all came, and they all ordered Heineken's beer. I love to go out to restaurants. Well, there were many restaurants in those days. I don't know if you are aware of it. Restaurants in the history of man is fairly recent. It's less than 200 years old. And restaurants started, as you can imagine, in France. In France. When the Russian army conquered Napoleon and they marched into France, they went to the soldiers, who, of course, nobody ever heard of a restaurant before. They went to the restaurants. And in those days, as well as now, the restaurants had lengthy meals. And they yelled, "Bistroch! Bistroch!" which means hurry up, which is where the word bistro comes from. Our restaurants, in those days, as I say, there weren't many ethnic restaurants around. Where I live in Adams Morgan on 18th Street, there are more restaurants now than there was in the whole suburbs, really. There was very few in the suburbs. What I particularly like, which is no longer here, is it okay?
Well, I guess we can certainly, I was thinking we might start showing some pictures.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right, John. No, you can finish your last thought and then we'll start.
I'll finish. One of the things that disappeared in the city was where the wharf is. In those days, there used to be small restaurants going out into the water. The restaurants were, I'm not sure if they were great. I don't think they were great. I think they were good. But they took it away. It's one of the things that I regretted. Of all the things that have been taken down, you see all the buildings that you'll be seeing that have been torn down in the city. Well, I was more unhappy about those restaurants leaving the waterfront than anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. It's a real thrill to have everybody participating today on this. And of course, everyone in the audience will have a chance to participate as well. Maybe there is a light switch. Oh, there it is, John. I think we're good now. Can everybody see? There it is coming up. Oh, good. I'm sorry. Vance, explain who this is, and then I'll go on.
I'm sure it needs a footnote or two. That was me when I was singing. That's real hair. It wasn't mine, but it was real. A toupee made by Maison Marcel. If you remember him over on Connecticut Avenue, which went out and they saw myself. Anyway, yeah, I was performing at the Quonset Supper Club. How many of you remember the Quonset? There you go, yeah. It looked like a Quonset. It was huge. They had a downstairs room. In the main showroom, had 4 go-go girls, a band, a really good band, and then I was the house singer, you know. And now you can imagine how excited the people were to hear me when the go-go girls walked off the stage and I took their place. And
what years was that?
What's that?
What year was that?
Year 66. 66,
That was
67.
after Blaze Star.
That was after Blaze Star, yeah. The Quonset can be seen in the movie Blaze, about Blaze Star and her life. It's a fairly good movie, but she started out there when she came up from the South. Her first job was at the Quonset. Oh man, yeah, there's an ad about it, and that's in the column by, how many of you remember Don Hearn? Now he was the equivalent counterpart of John. John was with the Post, and Don Hearn was with the Daily News, and really nice guy. So he was so nice, he gave me some good write-ups.
So that's, yeah, I wanted to show Vance's, actually was on stage here. Let's see. This is one of John's columns. That's where it was in the paper. What section was it in, John?
What was known as the style section.
It was in style? So it's called style back then?
Style section.
Okay, so, and it was every day, or?
4 days a week. 4
days a week. So that was, you'd have quite the placement. I think I've got another one.
Psycho was released.
I'm sorry, here's another one. This is Liberace brings 3-ring circus. Now, John, who did it before you? Was that, do you remember? How long was the Around Town column?
Long time.
On the Town, I mean, on the Town. And I think William Rice did it after you?
After me.
After William Rice, okay.
He was more interested in restaurants. He covered more restaurants than music. I was more interested in music. I did restaurants too.
Now here, you mentioned Don Hearn, but this is actually John Seagraves.
John Seagraves was with the Washington Star.
And his son Mark Seagraves is on WTOP radio, if you hear that. And he actually sent me that he unfortunately couldn't be here, but I invited him, and he sent this picture of his dad, John Seagraves, interviewing Anne Margaret, I guess at the Shoreham, probably. I'm sorry, and Don Hearn passed away, I think, in the early 90s. So I wanted to represent him, I guess. This is, I guess here, I don't know, Vance, you might want to explain, this was Coffee and Confusion, one of the places that you used to frequent.
Yeah, the Coffee and Confusion was a beatnik coffee place, known for its strong coffee and weak poetry. And anybody who wanted could come in and read to a background of conga music or bongos or whatever, and it was cool and it was hip and it was the thing of the day. And I only read there once, but I attended a number of times, and it was fun. It's known for 2 things, I'll say quickly. One is the first Washington, D.C. drive-by shooting. They didn't have a name for it at that time, but for that kind of shooting, but it took place there. And the other was later learned that Jim Morrison hung out there.
And here's the gentleman. I'm sorry, Mike, why don't you go ahead, Mike?
The Coffee and Confusion was kind of caused a really colossal stir in D.C. I mean, when that place was going to open up, oh my God, the police came out in force. They shut down K Street. Couldn't drive on K Street. They had police all over the damn place, and all they did was have coffee and not so good poetry, and people would read poetry, and then somebody would go. And then the next to her and would read poetry. I mean, it was, it wasn't much to it. You had a question?
I had one anecdote and one question. My brother, when he got there in '63, I think they changed the name of the place to the Crow's Toe. Is that right? He had a folk group there called the Harvard Alley Singers. They used to strum their guitars there. And I was wondering what happened to Teddy Porterchenko, the legendary manager, who was this huge guy with an earring that got around the place for a while.
No, I think he sold out pretty fast.
The owner was a guy named Bill Walker, and he went on to other things.
I want to just point out, this is Bill Walker up here on the screen. And this is in Coffee and Confusion. And I want to thank Mark Sosnick, who's in the back row, the author of Life and Times of Jim Morrison in Alexandria, Virginia. The Lizard King was here. And he, of course, has done a lot of research into the beat era in Washington, D.C. So thanks, Mark. What's the name of the article? The coffee, that this was, it's online.
Coffee, Confusion, and Jim Morrison.
It's online, that article. So that's this picture's from, but that's Bill Walker, who had Coffee and Confusion. Sir?
Very, very long time ago, I think it was back in the 60s, I did a short poem there. Very, very short. And I was told, wasn't that the first coffee house in Washington?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah.
So that was the first coffee house, but I don't think it was the only one. But this was the first. And
Hamilton Arms was the first.
What?
Hamilton Arms Coffee House. Jeffrey went there.
Hamilton Arms in Georgetown. And the building's still there. It's now a apartments or condo.
It's a business community, and it's called Hamilton Court on 31st Street.
And that,
they set the standard. They opened up in the 30s.
and that also was the, if my research is correct, when it was a restaurant, it was the site of the first salad bar in Washington. Anyway, here's the next. This is here's
downhill slide.
This is an article from the Washington Post from 1964, which actually talks about 14th Street. And you know, DC's block is a swinging land of hot job by day 800 block of 14th Street. Northwest is State and full of typists and clerks. At night, neons flash on and everything goes. I would like to just read something, and maybe Richard would care to comment on this. This is in the article. There's another saying on the block that the first question a hitchhiking serviceman asks within the district of anyone who can tell him is, "Where's Benny's?" Benny's rebel room is bedlam in close order drill. It is rock and roll. It is the beat, man. It is some kind of way out, and one could mean gone, man. It is for the very young, and on weekends the line forms to the left, right, and sometimes both of the entrance. It changed managements quite recently, some say without missing a drum beat. There's a nominal cover charged if 25 cents can be called nominal, and it serves to keep out the unappreciative.
That's very true. Yeah. Very true.
I came in 1966, so I assume it was the same in '64, and that is that the blue laws were in effect. And so at midnight, the bars had to quit serving. Oh, yeah. And then you might be able to find an after-hours place. But essentially, there was no liquor on Sunday, and that means beginning at midnight.
Does anyone care to comment on that? Or?
No, you had to close at midnight. You had to open at 1 o'clock, I believe it was. Yeah.
And only beer and wine on Sundays.
Yeah, that didn't last too long.
And it was, Mark, were you telling me about the issue with regard to restaurant versus bar?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe that was...
No, that wasn't me, but you did have the After Hours Club. The Atlas Club, which turned into Basson's Top of the Walk, was one of the ones that was there for many years.
And coffee hour at Bohemian Caverns.
One of the things...
You call Jack Al's, it was an after-hours club.
Does that sound familiar?
There's one in Bethesda also. One of the things that the laws that they had in the district for all bars and restaurants, you had to sell 51% food. Right. So, anybody remember Murray Steaks? My father was his first customer. My father, he gave him a freezer, big stand-up freezer. My father says, fill it up. They filled up with frozen food. If that restaurant was there today, that same food would be there. Never opened it and had a lock on it, and that was it. And the liquor board would come by and they would check. And my father knew everybody. They had, at that time, they had 500 policemen in the entire city. My father knew 499 because I only used to come in the back door for drinks. But he would fudge every month because nobody that had a bar sold 51% food. So finally they did away with that.
The weirdest liquor law perhaps though was that you couldn't stand up and drink, you couldn't carry your drink. If you saw an attractive person across the room that you wanted to go say hello to, you asked the waitress or waiter to carry your drink for you, and you went there. That was absurd.
That sign that says Rebel Room, strictly against the law. You couldn't have anything that had anything to do with the South in the North. My father basically owned the liquor board, so they passed it, and he had a rebel flag. See where it says Benny's? Behind it was a rebel flag. Yeah, nobody said anything.
Question?
Yeah, a couple slides back you had the Bohemian Caverns. Can you all speak to anything about that?
Above the ad.
No, above it was the Bohemian Caverns.
I love the Bohemian Caverns. That has had 2 lives. The old life was really good, fine jazz and discovered a lot of people such as Roberta Flack. Now she started at Mr. Henry's, but she got discovered at the Bohemian Cavern by Les McCann, who had heard about her and had come to his gig a few days early just to hear her, and then had her signed up. And then the first time ever I saw your face in the Clint Eastwood movie, Play Misty for Me, made her a star. But that was a great jazz place. I saw Joe Williams and some of the great jazz people there. Then for years it was out of business, as was that whole corridor. And then some years ago it came back again, and it's still like it was before.
Bring up
a great
something
jazz
about
place.
Bohemian Caverns. It was managed by a guy named Tony Taylor. He was crazy about new talent, and he had old talent too. Some of the greatest jazz musicians came in there. But one he brought in was out of Temple University, Bill Cosby, making his first nightclub appearance of a good club. And he bombed on the first show. I wrote about it. He bombed. The second show, he did okay. But as you say, it was one of the most, also one of the most atmospheric. When it was below, and they had, I can't remember if it's a stalactite or, but the thing went down. Great looking place. I'm sorry.
That's all right. No, please. I want to. Yeah, this is great to be able to. So that was Benny's here.
Ramsey Lewis recorded an album there. So there's a Ramsey Lewis.
Yeah, the In Crowd.
The In Crowd.
The In Crowd.
Yeah, that's right.
Richard?
I was there.
Is that right?
One of our most famous customers was Frankie Lane. Anybody remember him? Mule Train?
Oh, yeah.
He used to come in, he's deaf as a doornail, where he was. And at that time, when we first opened, we had tablecloths, white tablecloths. And he used to sign them. My father came in one day, all the tablecloths were gone. He'd sign them and give them away. Around the corner, there was a hotel, Parkside Hotel. And you remember that?
Yeah, they had a pub there.
And one of the people in there got murdered. And they found out that the guy up above was playing Mule Train day and night, one night, just keep on playing it. The guy went up and shot him. Another quick story. Harry Truman used to walk up and down 14th Street. And my father said he was going to go out there and invite him in for a drink. Well, he got as far as the sidewalk before the Secret Service pounced on him and beat the hell out of him.
And that was Benny Mendelsohn.
Yeah, that's it.
Benny Mendelsohn.
One and only.
This is another. This is all from that ad. That I mentioned. The ad about the block, about 14th Street from '64. That's the Speakeasy, which was in the basement, I believe, of the Casino Royal. And here's another picture. I think, John, you had mentioned, or there was actually talk earlier about the kind of ragtime, or the kind of the sing-alongs, or the piano entertainment. I found that very interesting in my research, that so many of the clubs and restaurants really catered to that, and there was a real strong clientele.
Predated karaoke. Predated karaoke.
So this was, I guess, one of, was there a question here?
Well, just to add on, right up the block from the Casino Royale on the K Street side was the round, not the Round Robin, but anyway, it was on K Street. Ken Foy played ragtime piano there for like decades.
The Robin's Nest.
Robin's Nest, yeah. My dad used to go there. And then the Purple Tree and the Hamilton, all those piano places were pretty crazy.
Yeah, when I was going to college, I used to go to Wisconsin. The Old Europe used to have a piano downstairs, and we would sing all night long, pound down beers down that place. So the karaoke, when you were talking, John, I was thinking, when you were describing that old TV, I was thinking, the first reality TV, because they do that crap now. They get away with it.
And then, well, here's, I actually was going to next show the Casino Royale here, and I would like to take this moment to introduce another guest, somebody I'm very thrilled to meet and happy to have here in the audience, and that's Barbara Zeiger, who is the wife of Leon Zeiger, who was the owner of the Casino Royale and the Speakeasy, which you just saw, and many others, the Blue Mirror. I'm sure everybody, if you'd like to say something now or afterwards, I certainly would love to have your.
The one funny story about the Speakeasy that I remember well, of course there were a lot of them about the casino, but Leon, where the girls went up to the service bar, they wore the scanty little costumes, you know, little French maid things, and he had to build a little platform, so they had to lean over to pick up their drink orders. And it was one of his big promotions, you know, but yeah, a little costume were a big thing, and the casino was a lot of stories about that.
Because this was, the casino was built in, I guess, well, I'm not sure, it escapes me. It was a Chinese restaurant, but also entertainment. This was before Leon had taken it over, obviously, this postcard. But next, I can show you, that's, Leon brought Mae West in. And this is one of the postcards. What this Mae West performing? Do you know when that would have been?
She was there, but I know he said, you know, she played the horror on stage. You know, why don't you come up and see me sometime? And she was booked, and with every show, you had to have a mix of comedy, you know, singer, entertainment, whatever. And he used to deal with MCI Entertainment in California, Stan Zucker, who was behind the TV show Dragnet. If anybody remembers Dragnet? But he would call Stan and say, you know, hey, I need some comedy, I need this and that. And Stan Zucker had sent him a comic to precede Mae West, and she came stomping into my husband's office, and she said, I can't go on stage after that comic. He's playing the part of a preacher. I play the part of a whore. and Leon kept saying, you know, oh, give him another chance. You know, I'll get rid of him tomorrow. We've got to get somebody to replace him. And this went on for 4 or 5 nights. You know, oh yeah, we've got somebody else coming in. And I guess one night Lee heard laughter in the audience, and it turned out that Bob Hope was in the audience and had gotten up on stage with this little comic. And, you know, he was doing a little stick with him. And it turned out it was Andy Griffith, was the comic. Yeah, he did.
And then Leon Zeiger,
Excuse me.
John?
The club was on the 2nd floor. Not many places on the 2nd floor ever lasted. Nobody liked to go up. This was a wonderful club of entertainment. They had a band, Count Basie, who came in, who tore the place apart. Phyllis Diller came in at the height of her popularity. They're still laughing down there. And a comic, Jackie Leonard, known as Fat Jack, one of the deadly wit. He would attack everybody. Anyhow, they had great entertainment in that club. Not bad food.
And Leon, of course, many other restaurants. I do want to say, this is something I've got. This was, I bought a bunch of swizzle sticks, and this was in it. It's actually, I know this couldn't be a swizzle stick, but it says the Speakeasy, 802, 808, 14th Street.
Wait a minute.
But,
Knockers Up. Knockers Up. Man, there was
okay, that's
a risque female comedian.
Rusty Warren.
Rusty Warren.
Is that what this is?
And Knockers Up was
okay.
her slogan, and then the audience would do so.
Definitely not a swizzle stick. Well, I've got two of them.
They come in fingers, Jeff.
One says Speakeasy and one doesn't have any logo on it.
It looks like a mallet, and I said, no, that's a knocker.
Knocker, right.
And he said, well, what's it for? I said, I have no clue, but
Knocking.
it's a knocker.
For knocking.
Yeah, that was her applause.
She had several 33 1/3 records. So
Oh, yeah.
when I was
right.
going to college, we would
That's
go to a
right.
friend's house, and she would play the Rusty Warren records.
Play those, play Red Fox
Right.
records. And
I think that was one of the first restaurants that you could throw peanuts all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and there was a story about the peanuts, because the city came in and said that the peanut dust was toxic. And Leon went out and hired a toxicologist who testified on Capitol Hill. And there was one senator who came out and said, well, his name was Art Pilati, was a toxicologist. He said, well, Dr. Pilati, you say this stuff, but suppose someone dropped a lollipop in that peanut dust and a little child licked it. He said, Senator, that child would be in his 90s before he did it.
We check IDs.
Is there a question right here?
What year did the Speakeasy open?
Does anybody know offhand? I mean, the
1960.
1960. Thank you, Mark.
Before that, wasn't that an after-hours club down there?
No.
I think it was a clothing store, or
Well, you had Whalen's Drug was on the corner, I believe.
Right. I mean,
And,
under the Casino Royal.
huh?
I mean, under the Casino Royal.
Yeah.
It was
Because I went to an after-hours club there in 1943 and sat down with my back to the wall on the long bench, and who was sitting just 2 or 3 people away from me, but Dana Horney. And boy, was she gorgeous. She didn't have to sing.
I know, this is, you were asking about the Lotus earlier, and did Leon have the Lotus, or?
It was, my father's.
Oh, I'm sorry. What's your name, Audrey?
Audrey. Yeah, it was owned by a group of Chinese. It was a cooperative. And I remember, you're talking about the 60s, but I remember it was my playground in the 40s and 50s. Right. Because my mother would go shopping downtown and bring the kids. And in fact, all the children of the employees, the Chinese employees worked there, would be left there while the mothers went shopping. And the ballroom, the floor would be where we'd slide on our stomachs on chairs and slide across the dance floor. We'd play the piano and stuff like that. And then we'd have dinner and come home with my father, and I'd see the showgirls in the back rooms, and it was our place of a playground. And I know that I heard that Edie Gourmet and Steve Lawrence sang there, Johnny Ray, and Kate Smith even had her start. And this is in the, I grew up in the 40s and 50s when we went down there. And I
Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I remember is that there was a door on street level, and then you looked straight up about 40 steps. That you walked straight up, and then there was the door that admitted you to the room, the restaurant, and the show area. You mentioned Johnny Ray. Yes, I remember him, seeing him, and also Don Cornell, if anybody remembers.
Yeah. And my parents' banquet was held there in 1938 at the Lotus. So, and it was even before then that it opened. And it was one of the more successful restaurants of the Chinese community. Because my father opened 1 or 2 other restaurants in Chinatown and around town. But that was the one that the Chinese community, I mean, a lot of the, say, Chinese community, either in the restaurant business or the laundry business in those days. I mean, that's all there was basically open for Chinese. And even in the 50s, everyone in the restaurant, all the employees had to sign allegiance to the United States because of the communist Red Scare.
But the chorus line used between shows used to run up to my father's place, belt a few drinks, and run back.
And I always eat American food because my father said, "Don't you want to eat the Chinese food?" I said, "No, I want the American food."
Chinese food anywhere, right?
And I guess this is, I think, here's just, I obsessively collect ads, and this was one for the Casino Royale. I'm not sure the date. I think it's, but this probably the 60s at some point. Here's an ad for Rand's, which was on 14th Street. And that was, Rand's was like...
Leo Halpert. It was right around the corner.
On H Street or, oh, I Street, I'm sorry, on I.
It was on the south side, the Hayloft was on the other side.
Yeah. They own both of them.
And then here, these are, here's the Blue Mirror, which was on 14th Street. And I think Leon had the Blue Mirror, he bought that.
Wait, an important point of interest. There were two Blue Mirrors. Anybody aware of that? Yes. There were two Blue Mirrors. The strip club that we're seeing, and then also a pastry club, featured pastries down on 13th and So one featured pastries, the other featured pasties. Boom, rinse out.
Now this is actually a picture of, I guess, 14th Street in the 70s, perhaps. And there's another. That's the Casino Royale, and at the top, on the top floor. This is an interesting print somebody had made in the 80s of the street. An artist named Rick Beal. Of course, it's all been. It's vanished. It's gone. Yeah, there's no. Which what? I'm sorry. The Equitable Building on the right there.
The northeast corner of H and 14.
Northeast corner of H and 14.
Where Wilner's Haberdashery used to be.
Wilner's Haberdashery.
People's Life Building, built 1912.
Okay, these are some of the. I think I'm just going to. This was the Gaiety. Well, this is a little early here. I think I'm going to start the Emil press photos in a moment here. But this was just. That's the Gaiety on 9th Street. I think it was believed this was its previous incarnation, the original. That's in the 60s. Thank you, Michael Dolan, for finding this. Appreciate it. At the one of my colleagues. This is from again. I think when we'll find the Gaiety was closed in the early 70s, and it was a burlesque theater.
With the mayor of 9th Street.
I'm sorry, the mayor of 9th Street?
Lake.
Jimmy Lake.
Anybody care to talk about Jimmy Lake, the mayor?
He used to do the boxing matches too, didn't he? He was the announcer at the boxing.
A wrestler down there, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Right. Yeah.
It's interesting, the byline of this article is Aaron Latham, who wrote Urban Cannibalism. Married Gomer F.
Was that ever the Central Theater? That picture you
Yes, it was the Central.
It became the Central Theater. It eventually closed as the Gaiety, and then it moved to a theater that was known as the Art Theater across the street. Which was the Art Theater was the Schubert?
No.
It was a legitimate theater, and then it went to became an adult establishment, and then the Gaiety went in there. That's the Gaiety being raised in 1973. This is from the Washington Post. That was where was it? Is it where the FBI building is now? Across from the FBI building. Okay.
About a block, I think.
I see. I wanted to just spend a little time. This is Basson's here. I have this. I was fortunate to get this on eBay. But it's a. This was one of the Mark, do you remember this placemat?
I do.
I don't have any, but
Okay, well, that's this is neat to find something like this, and it's. Was there any significance to the placemat there?
my father was not a dog person, although one person did pay him his bill once with a puppy. Because he didn't have any money, and he sent him back to get money to pay the bill, and he showed up with a puppy dog that he ended up bringing home. But I will ask others what the relevance of the dogs were in that.
But it talks about how it's 7 floors. I don't know if you really discussed how big Basson's was earlier.
No, Basson's encompassed the whole corner from a PMI parking lot up to the National Press Building around 14th Street. The Post was nearby, the Evening Star was nearby, but there was a cafeteria which previously was a Shoals cafeteria. There was a room called the Lounge, which was where a lot of the reporters from the Press Building would come. There was a ticker tape, not ticker tape, a teletype machine in there that would be clacking away so they could be able to keep track of the news going on in the world. There's a story that when a big event happened and they would have to run and go out of town, that Harry or my Uncle George would give them money from the cash register so they were able to go out of town and do their reporting. There were 2 rooms downstairs, as I mentioned, one the Escapade where Jerry was, and also a bar downstairs. A regular gold room, which was the regular dining room.
Jeff, excuse me, can you back up?
Sure.
One more. Look at those prices. Money will remind you, money was different in those days. Gas was 18 cents a gallon.
$1.95.
You go to a restaurant and get a meal for $4.50. You could get a beer for 50 cents. Cover charge, 50 cents. At the shore, it was $1. Look at the prices.
I have a copy of this menu up front for those of you who would like to see.
And I guess you said earlier about it becoming the first sidewalk cafe in Washington.
Yeah, that was one of the big things that really launched it. They did fine until then. The Sidewalk Cafe was a risky venture to get into. It cost Harry $12,000 to build it, not counting the contributions to political campaigns to get it approved. And they weren't sure it was going to be financially make sense, but he did it anyhow.
Jeff, excuse me once more?
Sure.
Sidewalk cafes. In case it was a fire, the fire trucks and firemen couldn't get by. Prostitutes might come by. People would get sick from the fumes, from the buses and everything. And I said, wait a minute, how about in Paris? Everybody here goes to Paris and everybody's sitting outside and the buses are spewing fumes like we never saw. Anyhow, it passed and they had the first sidewalk.
Did many restaurants start right after that just opened the floodgates?
Actually, they were very hesitant about it. They waited to see what would happen. The idea came from when Harry was in Paris, I guess either during the war or some other time thereafter, and it just seemed like a great idea. It was a very French influence.
The sidewalk wasn't very big.
No, it was 3 tables deep.
Yeah, so it wasn't going to be.
And you got the approval like it seemed to me like November or February. It was off season when you got the approval. And they built it, and I remember coming out of the National Theater, and we were so happy to have it that even though it was like the middle of March, we were sitting there 11 o'clock at night. It was the first time we ever went on the sidewalk in Washington.
The first night they had liquor there, actually, the cast of Irma La Douce, we have photographs, came, and there's pictures of them, shorts in the Post too, of having champagne on the sidewalk.
I think I'll go ahead and start showing some of the press collection here, which is one of the special thought about.
Oh no, I was just looking around.
Okay.
I thought that I don't know whether you have any pictures of the showroom in there or not, but I remember when John was talking about the Blue Room at the showroom. Well, I was going to college and I couldn't afford to go to the Blue Room, but they had the Marquee Lounge on the other side of the building, and you got Mark Russell on the weekends, and Mark Russell would write songs. He would get a copy of the Post in the morning, and he would write a couple of songs about what he saw in the Post, and he would sing them that night. And it was great for college kids, because I'd go down there. It was a one drink, and
more than college kids came in there.
Huh?
More than college kids came in that room.
Tell me about it. Yeah, I was there all the time.
When Duke Ellington was in town, he came in frequently, and I happened to be there twice. And whenever Duke Ellington traveled, he traveled with a retinue. Usually Billy Strayhorn was right next to him, who was his co-writer. And Duke would sit down while Mark was playing, and Duke Ellington always wrote music. No one went near him, but many luminaries came in that room.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember my favorite story there was I was there. I was there this one night when they had the Republican Governors Convention going on, and Nelson Rockefeller was there. And if any of you remember the infamous affair he had, where he cheated on his wife and hooked up with this
Megan
woman,
Morshak.
This woman, what's her name? Happy? Yeah.
That was his wife, Happy. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so he's there. I mean, you know, they're there, and he walks into the Marquee Lounge with Happy, who I don't think it's his wife yet, and Mark Russell was always watching the audience. I mean, he could, you know, he saw everything that was going on, and right in the middle of the song that he was doing, they walked in, didn't drop a note. He said, "Forget your troubles, come on, get happy." You never saw such a U-turn in your life, out of there in a heartbeat. Audience went wild.
But anyway, so this is one of this is from 1959. This is let's see, this was 9th Street. I think, is that the Schubert?
No, it's 9th and E.
Oh, okay.
9th and E? It's 9th and E?
On the Warner Theater, when they put the Cinerama screen up, that was one of the funniest things I ever saw in a movie. This is Cinerama. If any of you saw it, was pretty stupid. All it was is a lot of stuff going on. You ride in a car, you ride in an airplane, things like that. And while I'm watching this, there's a section of it where they're on a roller coaster, and people in the audience are going like this, and as the roller coaster went around this sharp turn, this woman sitting on the aisle in front of me fell out of her chair. I think all she's got to think is glad she's got it dark in there, you know.
This is the Lowe's Columbia. So,
that was originally staged. That was public stage theater.
That was on F Street. That was in between the Metropolitan and the Palace.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
They tore that down to build the International Safeway. Which was a blow.
This is
single seat.
That's 9th Street.
9th and D.
8th and D.
8th and D.
Blacksburg's? Yeah, that's the Stables. That's where the DC Arts was for many years.
The Stables?
That's still standing.
Oh, okay.
The building in the middle of the picture is still standing. Everything else is gone.
Okay, this is that's the Schubert Theater, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, which had been
and that was the Gaiety originally, and then it was.
Well, it was a church originally.
Really?
It was built as a church.
9th Street was always an interesting street.
9th Street. So this Schubert became, and so here's Swing Coffee on E Street.
Yeah, there's facades.
Oh, and I got to mention something about, I got to mention the restaurant next to Swing's Coffee, which is famous too, Whitlow's. An interesting bar that can be seen in the movie Broadcast News, exactly right. Holly Hunter and William Hurt have a conversation in front of Whitlow's not long before it was closed up.
This is from July '59.
Yeah, the owners moved it to Arlington and they kind of reconstructed it over there. You get a good feel of it.
Yeah, it's quite different though. It was so interesting. It was a restaurant for secretaries, etc. during the day, and for people who really needed a drink at night. Clientele changed at about 6:45. I remember I was late one night.
This is D Street.
D Street.
And Hummels?
Is that
Hamels?
Hamels. What was Hamels? Oh, Hamels Restaurant. This is from July '59. You say it says 10th Street here.
And the
10th and D.
10th and D. Okay.
Evening Star parking lot.
Evening Star parking lot.
That's on the far side of the frame.
Yeah, on the other side of the street.
Oh, okay.
The only thing still standing today is that the Art Nouveau moving company was incorporated into the new super block they built there. Everything else was moved down. Hamels.
That's Hamels. That's Hamels. Okay, that's a close-up of Hamels Restaurant.
They were known for their pot roast.
Right.
Yeah.
This is Chris Earnshaw, everybody. You probably read his letters to the editor. Not quite as many as...
My spread's in the Sunday magazine. I don't know what that
Oh, yeah, Sunday Magazine, too. He's also a photographer. This is the Rendezvous Grill and Bar. That's from, this is 10th Street. Dyson's Engineering Supply.
Oh, that's the horse trough.
Wow.
10th Street. The Washington Post built a horse trough there to commemorate clean water.
Not there now.
That's in storage.
This is Hall's Restaurant. This is the southeast corner of 7th and K Street in July 1959. What did Hall's serve? What was seafood? Okay. Well, there it is. I think. Yeah. So okay.
Rhodes Tavern.
That's Rhodes Tavern
And the Old Abbott Grill.
and the Old Abbott Grill right next to it.
50th and
The old Abbott Grill before it moved around the corner.
Record City was the ground floor.
Record City was what?
On the corner, you could get some 40.
Oh, okay.
Rock and roll 45s from there.
That's where you could get your records, right?
Oh, really? Right there? Is that what the Felds? The Felds?
That's Super Music City.
Super Music City.
You used to go there to get your tickets for the Carter Baron, and if you got there exactly 1 month, morning, 1 month before the performance, you could get that front row seat. That front row seat to see Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong.
That was a promotion. Really?
Yeah, well, that's where you bought tickets for Carter Baron.
Can you all hear all this up there? Great. Yeah, that's because. Did anybody know the Felds or have anything? Because they became the big dominant promoters.
Well, they bought the circus.
Right. I get. But they
started with the big music.
But they started the record store and then went to promoting Carter Baron. I see. So.
One more thing about Rhodes Tavern, Jeff, real quick.
Sure.
On the ground floor, and you want to flash back to that previous frame for a second. Those two small shops in the middle of the block was the third Blue Mirror, a sandwich shop not related to the other two, and that had been there since 1929. So had the Fruit Basket. My father used to buy all the stuff for our family holidays at the Fruit Basket. We'd have these little baskets of fruit, and sometimes would put a little brandy in there, just for spice.
Yeah, and our Keys was right up
Right.
the block.
Right. And that was the long lamented Garfields at that other corner.
This is Hall's Restaurant. This is the bar in Hall's Restaurant.
That's Southwest.
It says 7th and K Street Southwest, July 1959. What's that? Notice the tin ceiling. What happened? I know the tin ceiling there.
What was that block that was before?
Could you go back?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm sorry. This is the Peking restaurant.
And the Sloan's auction.
And Sloan's Auction Gallery. This is, there's the Lotus. That's the Lotus, Audrey?
Yes,
right there?
There's now a CVS underneath, but the stairway was that, where the Lotus sign is to the mezzanine, you walk upstairs that way. There used to be a Mr. Peanut shop there too.
Yes, yes.
Get my hot
There was a restaurant, like New Orleans style architecture.
Oh yeah, right here?
No, one before.
But back.
Before that.
That? Okay, I'm sorry. That's Hall's Restaurant. That's. I think I have an ad saying that like Diamond Jim Brady would be right at home here. And that was.
1860.
Hall's was in business since 1860. Hall's was in Southwest, 7th and K Street, Southwest. And I guess here, what it is Emil Press would read in the paper that buildings were coming down.
Right, the redevelopment.
And then
the whole neighborhood down.
So they tore it all down, so that's...
Incidentally, at Hall's, the owner was Julie Hall, who is from Baltimore. I'm from Baltimore, and I met her twice. And you see, this is a wonderful looking place. And there was a lot of drinking in those days, as there is now. And she pushed a drink called, Post Cafe. Women loved it. It's a liquor glass of cordials in which, because of the specific gravity, they're different colors.
Yeah.
And they pour it in off the back of a spoon so it doesn't mix up. Anyhow, people wrote about that. People from out of town wrote about Post Cafe.
Is that sort of like an outdoor cafe already? And that's the other one.
It was in the overhang, so the whole thing was about the sidewalk, how far it would extend to the sidewalk.
The sidewalk, I guess, literally was on the sidewalk. So
it was community, it was government property that you were checking
That
out
was
to
on
do a
the
business.
building lines.
Public space.
So that's Hall's, which was, and again, I think, and there's the Lotus. That's the first picture I had ever seen of the Lotus. I'd always seen it on a postcard. This was Tom Hallfish. Oh, and this is Hall's Restaurant too.
Oh, yeah.
This was Hall's Restaurant. That's Hall's Restaurant.
Victorian.
And this is Hogate's. That's from August 1962. I guess the original Hogate's.
And they didn't tear it down until 1969, though. And then they, that new place, the disco was called H2O, but it was originally the new Hogate's in the 80s.
The building's that's still up.
Right, that's across the road from where this photograph was.
Well, unfortunately, the new Hogate's was like, it wasn't Hogate's anymore, it was like a hot shop.
No comparison, just the name. There's Reeves.
This is Reeves, Reeves Restaurant and Bakery on F Street, September 1959. This, I believe, is the Astor Restaurant. Oh, yeah. This is the 1800 block of M Street, September 1959.
Well, down on the corner, down the corner there was Gusty's restaurant. It was a colossal favorite with high school kids. Like, we go to that one, or we go to one on the DC food market as well.
And then Luigi's around the corner.
Yeah, Luigi's.
Which is still there.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
has been preserved by the city.
The block, but it's so funny. I mean, you can't even get a sense with all the buildings. That's what was so magical about looking at these slides and seeing these pictures. Is that just it's a whole different city.
This particular group is the only one in that part of town that still looks that way.
That's right. Everything else
They decided not to tear that block down.
wiped out, flat up on the side. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's got Joanne's and all that.
I was going to say, the types of businesses.
Don White.
This is O'Donnell's on E Street.
Well, they moved to Bethesda.
Which, this was I guess in the Warner Theaters right around. Then there's House of Novelties. I just saw, look at
I
that.
mentioned rum
What is
buns.
it? Pardon?
Rum buns.
Rum buns.
Oh, yeah.
That's,
I remember this stuff.
They didn't move to Bethesda, they had to.
This was the original.
this is 1959, September
Somebody
1959.
would stand in one of the windows and be sauteing.
Right.
Right, and they had these portholes, Jeff, inside with this moving ship, and if you look at that while you were eating your bouillabaisse, it was...
And not many doors down was Bish Thompson's. Nobody ever mentioned, everybody mentions the McDonald's, nobody mentions Bish Thompson's, where all 350 pounds of them would sit beside the kitchen door and sample the food coming out to make sure it was representative.
The next night, all 350 pounds.
So there really was a Bish Thompson.
Was that the one that? Oh yeah. Is that the one? That was the one downstairs.
This must be
downstairs
the.
to get to that one, right?
On the East Street,
They redid the facade.
Okay, well, this is
Well, there
So this,
there was
I guess
one
again.
restaurant. There was, maybe somebody remembers, there was a restaurant as you went towards 13th Street where you went downstairs.
No, the Neptune Room.
Neptune, there you go. Okay. Yeah.
So apparently they changed the facade of O'Donnell's here. There's Hodge's Restaurant.
That's grocery.
And something called Hickory.
Hickory House.
Hickory House.
They had strippers there too. Up on the second floor, they had strippers at the Hickory House.
Hodge's Restaurant. Now there's the Casino Royal and Wayland Drugs on the ground floor. You can see the casino marquee. And this is from October 1959.
There's a lot of Buicks in this thing. It's like an ad for Hyattsville Buicks.
Yeah. Oh, there's the casino again, and the marquee, and you see more of the street. White Tower, and I think the Blue Mirror.
And then Rand's was right around the corner from that, Jeff. The side of that wall in the background would have been the building that Rand's, and also Port Said, the Egyptian Syrian.
Yeah, we were right across the street from it.
You were directly across?
Yep, directly across.
Oh, so and so out of frame to the right is Casino Royal, and
Right where the Blue Mirror is. We're facing the Blue Mirror.
we're facing the Blue Mirror.
Yeah, you want to hear a funny story about the Blue Mirror?
Yeah, remember George George?
We had a bartender that was always a big gambler. And one of the bouncers there, they were always gambling. It's in the winter, snowing again, and the bouncer bet the manager, Bob Parker, that he wouldn't run across the street naked and come back. He'd win $100. He said, I'll take you up on that. So he took his clothes off, ran out the door, click. And he came banging on the door. The doors we had were about that thick. And he must have stood out there for 15, 20 minutes. You know, finally, a policeman came up and said, all right, the game's over. Unlock the door. Let him in. On the White Tower, we had this 6'6" Marine was going out there, and he was drunk as a skunk, and he fell into the glass, the one right below the light, and he broke the window. So every time he'd come by, he'd go over with a napkin. Somebody came, what are you doing? He says, I paid for it, I'm going to make sure it's clean. You could almost see the streetcar platform.
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Right, there's the
streetcar platform. No, that's where,
Okay, I'm sorry. Here's Lowe's Palace, and you said the Blue Mirror?
Yeah, and they had a lot of other clubs today later on. The Mark IV was one of the first discos in D.C. They had a lot of clubs in that corner building. And that was built originally as the Brownlee's Chocolate Factory, believe it, in 1929. They made their own chocolates on their own.
That's, Harvey's. This is Harvey's, which is from 1868 it opened.
But it moved up to Connecticut Avenue in 1928. Federal Triangle Authority.
So that's the second location.
Then there was a third.
This is still here, right? That's in Columbia Road.
The building's there.
Oh, okay, the building's there. I'm sorry, they went out of there. This is, yeah, that's Heon's restaurant. It became Nathan's.
Heon ran the Georgetown Theater.
Gus Heon, right? Yeah, Gus Heon, he owned the Georgetown Theater, I guess after this, or this was the family restaurant. So that's, Emil Press did try to, get around the city. Again, 4,100 slides. So not that many here. This is interesting to me because he had notes. What's interesting, he actually kept cards, wrote down what was on the location and the sites, where he basically left detailed notes, which is invaluable for an archive. And it's all this is searchable in the Historical Society database. And so this is listed as restaurants in Capitol Hill, but it also it's listed as a Tomaine Row. Exactly, it's where the manuscript, the Madison building is on the Library of Congress. But it's just so matter-of-factly at Tomaine Row. But and that's in researching it, it was colloquially called that.
Even congressmen felt ill there.
Yeah, but I think Pete's Diner is one of the last. Well, I mean, I don't mean to say anything bad about Pete's Diner, but it's still there from that period on 2nd Street, right next to the Library of Congress. Olmsted Restaurant.
F Street.
F Street.
One thing about Pete's, two of the staff from Cheryl's. When Cheryl's closed, they went over to work at Pete's. That's why the breakfasts are so good there.
Here you go, Mark. That's now Emil went and took a picture a month before the Sidewalk Cafe opened, and so now this corner, where this would be
14th and E, 14th and Penn.
Okay, so it was a really tall building, or did you take over other?
Well, the doorway to the left of the main is where you went to the top of the walk. Was called. You had Whalen's, and then if you followed around to the right was your entrances to the other rooms. So where the top of the walk is, going up to the 2nd and 3rd floors, was really one of the first, I want to say, discos in Washington as well. My father had gone to New York to the Peppermint Lounge in the 60s. We saw Chubby Checker there, and not one to write business plans or anything like that. 2 weeks later, they had the Twist going on there. I don't know if Chubby Checker came down or not, but they had the Twist for a while. As you mentioned earlier, the Hootenannies were up there. They later went into the Go-Go Girls on the lighted boxes, which was pretty exciting. One thing that I learned from going through the scrapbooks to come here was that President Kennedy had a physical fitness initiative in the 60s. And one of the things they had at Basson's up there was a dance marathon that was from 9 to 1. It wasn't a dance till you drop, and there actually was winners, and we have the cutting from the newspaper article up there. So the room tended to change with the tide. If it was disco, if it was hootenanny, if it was after hours, if it was gambling for a while, I guess. And so it was in constant flux.
And here's here's the Sidewalk Cafe. So a month later, it opened with the Sidewalk. Mike? Oh, okay, in the back, yes?
I have a question about the other Bassons, which saved the lives of GW college students, because we could get breakfast at 1 in the morning when we were finally finished studying at 20th in Pennsylvania, which is now our Johnny Rockets. Is that the same family?
No, well, to some degree. Basson's Delicatessen, which was opened in 1939, was Max Basson. Max Basson married my father's sister, Sarah Zeidelman, who became Sarah Basson. That was a cousin who opened it up and put the name, and they never bothered to ask them to change the name or anything like that.
Real quick, Mark, I just want to say that my father, Samuel Earnshaw, an attorney whose office was a block away from Basson's, he went to your dad's and uncle's restaurant so much, they said if he comes anymore, they're going to make him a partner. He used to drink that Bass ale and sit in that corner booth. And the building that the restaurant was in, I did some research in college. In 1875, some grocer named Lawford built it. It was an office of a grocery company. It was the D.L. Lawford.
The one on E Street?
Yeah, on E in Pennsylvania, right. Yeah, so that had some history, but that didn't stop them from tearing it down.
No, it sure didn't.
This is Harrigan's Restaurant at 9th and 8th Street, February '63. Was Harrigan's
Southwest, and this is one of the victims of the Southwest Indian.
Was this the Rock and Roll Club?
No.
It wasn't rock and roll, but that's where Jim Morrison used to go. They used to have an annual art show, one of the first bar restaurants.
Yeah, Mark Byron and
But restaurant.
Appeared there.
So that's Harrigan's. That's Harrigan. I knew I heard of Harrigan's.
When they tore that down in 1968, it was the oldest standing restaurant in the city. It was built in the like 1860s.
Yeah, it outlived that other place that said Halls and Harrogate's. Harrigan stayed open.
Wow. So Harrigan's, and then this is called Hedges Restaurant at 9th Street, 309 9th Street. 9th Street, okay, so was there more of a, yeah. And there's another interior of Hedges Restaurant.
Hedges or Hodges?
You know what? Gosh, could it be Hodges? Was Hodges on 9th Street?
Yeah.
We need to correct that in the database.
With roast beef.
Hodges, so that's Hodges then. Does anybody dispute that that's Hodges? Does anybody recall?
I think it's Hodges.
Okay. Feel free to interject. Genghis Khan Restaurant. This is now the Royal Palace on Connecticut Avenue. It was the Genghis Khan Restaurant in July '63.
Yeah, it was the first Mongolian restaurant ever opened in D.C.
That's Connecticut and what?
This is Connecticut and Florida.
Oh,
It's a strip.
Yeah, Eric's house in Everett.
Jeff, this is 14th and Penn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right here. That was the.
Yeah, right.
That's Florida.
Yeah, it's a steep hill there.
Yeah, exactly.
University.
Yeah, it is.
That corner was referred to since the mid-19th century as Newspaper Road.
Right.
Yes.
They had small offices. Associated Press was down there, and the taller building on the left was the Willard Building. A relative of my dad built that building. The same family that built the Willard Hotel, and that was demolished in '64.
And the Whalen Drug was more known for United Cigars than anything else.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's the other entrance to Bassett's.
So this is the whole Bassett's corner from.
That whole building.
Well, they only own the little one here. They rented the others from the left. That actually looks like it might be Scholl's Cafeteria, but be Bassett's Cafeteria, then the lounge. Then where the awning is, you could go down to the bar and the Escapade. Come around this side would be the top of the walk and the Sidewalk Cafe.
Another part of the history there is where the parking lot is. That was the original Washington Post building.
Yeah, that was a silhouette of the Post building. It was destroyed.
So here's the Lowe's Capitol. Now the press building.
Right, that theater.
There's the interior.
That's demolished, but the theater pillars are still standing on the facade outside.
There's
Boston.
If anybody has to, we are. If anybody would like to say anything, we are coming near the time that we're supposed to end. I'll continue to,
Oh, please continue.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere, and I encourage you that if you don't have to be anywhere, the building closes at 5. And we will slowly wrap up the slide presentation. But I do encourage you to stick around and to. But I think since people are having to leave now, I want to just take this moment to thank you all for coming. I want to particularly thank my panelists. Since we started, we had your last John Pagones on the right. Mendelson, Benny Beverly, Mark Zeigelman, who was Mike Baker, Mike Young Washingtonian, and Vance Garnett here. I also want to point out and thank John Kelly from the Washington Post for his continued support for projects such as this right here. His column is always, that's John right there.
I have a question.
Sure.
My memory of 14th Street is naked women for the most part, on stage and on screen. So I'm curious the progression, the turning points when, when Benny's Rubber Room went from burlesque to strip, and Casino Royale went from music to burlesque to strip to movie theater. What was sort of the thinking? How did that happen? Was it an evolution, or was it the market changing?
It's the market changed. The whole town changed, actually. After the riots, the whole town just took on a different complexion. And 14th Street really went downhill for a while. You had a lot of hookers there. Quick story. We had, out front, we had a woman who was there almost every day for the Salvation Army. After 2 years, I found out that she was a hooker. Yeah. Got to go, folks.
Oh, by the way, I want to thank also John Hine for taping, Jan Keskinen for helping to get this to work, Yvonne, of course, with the Historical Society, and I guess I'm going to continue to flip through some pictures.
Can we see these pictures on the website?
I'm sorry,
are these accessible on the website?
These are only accessible. You have to go in and search the database, so you have to go through it. They're not like, but if you search restaurants, they'll help you here or talk you through that. Sir, right there? John Pagonis, a question for you? A question, gentleman right there?
Any comments on restaurants and real estate in Georgetown?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any comments on restaurants and real estate in Georgetown? Really?
There are a couple of good restaurants in Georgetown. They're not great restaurants. I like, for instance, Bistro Francais. I like La Chaumière. Martin's Tavern is famous, but my personal opinion is I hate to say anymore because it's been there so long. You can't knock something that's been there for 100 years.
I'm sorry. 1 second, Chris. Did they answer your question, sir? Or,
I think you said.
But anyway, also, you know, I want to really thank Barbara Zeiger for coming from West Virginia. Chris Earnshaw, of course. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I actually wanted to make one quick plug because we finally got to the New York Avenue. I guess there'll be a picture of the Rocket Room coming up after this, but I've written a movie which is set at 12th and New York Avenue, and I'm just about to complete the screenplay, so if anybody wants to ask about it, I have a web address.
This is the famous restaurant.
Jeff,
Sir, John?
One more question.
How long was the Clockers Club around? Now in ancient.
I remember it. All I can say is,
How long did it last? Bailey used to like that.
I really don't know. It was around a long time. It was a respected club.
She was here on television. She said, "I'm going off to Club K."
Right.
And I never heard that before.
Sure, right here.
Yeah, I just want to know whether there were any type of fights or what kind of fights took place to stop the demolition of all the stock was.
Oh. Not much. Did everyone just let it go and survive?
It was run down.
Sir?
Well, the whole government was the three commissioners, and they did what they damn well pleased, and it was all black. It was all blacks over there anyway. So they said, "The hell with it. We're just going to tear it down." In fact, they gave very short notice to get out too. Very short notice.
I'm going to keep going through slides. Feel free to yell out to stop. Were there some more questions, sir?
What was the partner's name of the restaurant?
It was Harry Zeidelman, George Zeidelman, and Sarah Bassett.
And Sarah?
Bassett. Called her Mrs. B.
That corner right there looks like 22nd and P to me.
This is the Fireplace Restaurant?
Fireplace. And does anybody remember the singer who performed on the second floor in the chimney room? Joyce Carr?
Right.
She was really outstanding.
Joyce Carr.
That became that was a gay bar.
Don Mantikas introduced
Joyce Carr
Is it?
was a local, and she had a smoky voice, and she was as good a singer as ever lived.
Right.
But she never got anywhere. Finally, she left because she had her job couldn't last forever. And after the Fireplace, she became a court reporter.
And she got married.
I want to just take a moment to ask if there's anybody else that I missed whose family was involved with restaurants or nightclubs here.
I'd like to ask about one. Went through Harvey's. What was the family name Nissan coming from the church.
Wait a minute, Tom Harvey was the owner, the founder
Oh,
of
I
it.
think that went back like.
Yeah, way back when.
Way back when.
Final location was 18th and K, it was in the basement.
This is George, that's the cellar door. This is the cellar door from the 60s, I
The
think.
cellar door of the Shadows, which is where we went for, and comedians, we saw
That's where me and you was.
all the young comedians.
Woody Allen played
Woody
there.
Allen.
This was at Shadows. I think John, if you read John's columns, by the way, it's all, you can find this in the library and online. John's columns are an amazing window, because you reviewed things or mentioned that like these artists were playing.
And where was the Shamrock? The Shamrock next door.
Very interesting about the cellar door becoming the Shadows. What happened is, I can't remember, they lost their lease or the building was sold, I'm not sure. And they moved down the street on that side, and everyone said, when you move, you're going to lose your audience. Well, he didn't. They didn't. Actually, Woody Allen was not here, he was down the street.
Yeah.
The other street. It was his last nightclub appearance ever. And he was, of course, phenomenal. Phenomenal.
And then we would go to the French Quarter, which was a couple blocks down.
That's
John
right.
Eaton and
Right.
Tommy.
There was some marvelous musicians there. Ian and Sylvia, folk singer.
Yeah.
John Denver.
Yeah.
I have to mention one thing, if you don't mind. John Denver was famous, and he had an act opening for him here in town. A couple named
Bill Danoff
and Taffy.
Afternoon Delight.
Bill and Taffy, yeah.
And Danoff, they were Country Roads.
Starland.
Country Roads.
Starland.
But John Denver helped them a little, but John Denver was reputed to be the writer of that song, and he wasn't. He wasn't. It was Bill Danoff and Taffy Nivet.
And he had the Starland Cafe.
A local guy, by the way.
And I think the story is it was Clyde's, he was on the menu at Clyde's that he saw the name, like appetizer menu. Afternoon Delights. That's what I read. There's a, you know, I could, let me, John, you gotta go? John's gotta go again. Thank you. Do you have a question back here? Question? Bill Hurd? Bill Hurt. Bill Hurt from the Child Herald.
Yeah, Texas. He was from Texas.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's the guy that signed Emil.
Yeah.
Wild Bill Hurd.
Right.
This is sir right here.
Anybody remember? I think it was called Paul Young's.
Thanks for coming, man.
Is there a place called Paul Young's on Connecticut?
Paul Young's on Connecticut Avenue.
Real big, tall ceilings.
Tall ceiling.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anybody? I was on the radio and somebody called. Actually, the relative, I think the nephew or grandson of Paul Young called in.
Huh.
And he wanted to know where it was. He wasn't sure.
Mel Krupins.
Oh, it became Mel Krupins?
Exactly.
Oh,
But
okay.
they were actually on 14th Street at a time. This is where bar mitzvahs and things were held, and the mother, and then they opened the big one, I think, in the 60s.
It was downtown,
Fancy.
between K and L, right?
Yeah, the fancy restaurant in the 60s. I heard.
In the Bender Building. It was
Yeah.
brand new
There
restaurant.
you go.
This is the Siriana restaurant, which is still this is where like the 18th Street Lounge is.
Yes,
that corridor.
Bogies in the 70s where Angel was discovered. Meadows and his guys.
So it became a rock and roll club.
Roy Buchanan made his last appearance at that.
Bogies. That's Harvey's again. That's Harvey's. And next to the Mayflower Hotel.
That's the site of
How many different places?
They had like about 12. Every 5 years they changed rather than renew the lease.
Oh, no kidding.
The building next to Harvey's, Jeff, was the original location of IBM in the 1920s.
Wow.
Is that K Street or L? What am I looking at?
That's Connecticut Avenue.
Connecticut. What's
So
across
this is the Mayflower.
street? Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going up Connecticut, right?
So this is K Street.
Yeah, this is going toward L Street.
Here's Ben's. Ben's Chili Bowl. Yeah.
50 years in business.
And that's I have the year. I think. This is kind of neat. I love this. That's the Crazy Horse, in like 1965. That's the that's on M Street in Georgetown. So that was a big rock and roll club, and there it is. And now appearing the Commotions. So this is from 1965.
Well, I have a question for you. I cannot remember the name of the place. Saved my life. It's called Winston's now.
And that was the Shamrock.
The Shamrock. That was
Near
as
the
good
Southern
a bluegrass club as there has ever been. And I used to go there when the Country Gentlemen.
They were there for 12 years.
Yeah, I was there when the Country Gentlemen were there, and I remember when they split up, and the Seldom Scene was created from part of that. Eddie Adcock and his wife started their own band.
Eddie Gatton even performed there at one time.
That's right. And Ricky Skaggs was one of the people that joined the Country Gentlemen for a while.
Right, and then he played with Emil Harris.
Yeah. Well, I remember I was sitting in the bar listening to the Country Gentlemen one night, and I was chatting with this fabulously attractive woman next to me who was waiting to sit in with the band and sing a couple songs. She tried to get into the folk music scene in New York, and it was just too damn crowded. And she was a bluegrass singer anyway. It was Emmylou Harris. And shortly after that, bam, she got a gig at the Child Herald until she got kidnapped by I forgot who the guy was. Graham Parsons. What a weasel.
Well, here's the old Ebbett Grill, and I guess prior to moving around the corner.
Only the Walrus survived.
Swiss Chalet.
Where was that?
Fifth and L.
Yeah, Northwest. First place I ever had fondue.
Fondue.
This was a fondue restaurant.
It's now
Fondue. That's Sultan's Palace. Where was that? Connecticut Avenue, you're right.
Oh, that was later before Telford Pub. That's the same location.
Oh, yeah, Lord Telford. You walked in, you went up some steps, you went down some steps, and around and walked.
No sushi.
You shut down.
Lord Telford's, for anybody who remembers.
Okay. I think I live in that neighborhood. There's the Circle. That's the Circle. Circle Theater.
If anybody doesn't know what all the sad moaning is about, is that you could go there and for $1 or $2 you could see a classic double feature. You could see Body Heat and Chinatown together for $1 or $2.
My favorite double feature was King of Hearts and 1,000 Clowns. I always used to run those two together.
I thought this was interesting. It was the Redskins' office. Or, on L Street.
Yeah. Right near Harvard.
Yeah.
Oh, here, I got a number. This is
Connecticut and L.
Connecticut and L. Sorry. That's the Gaiety. This is a neat. This was in the Washington Post weekend section, in case you saw it. Yeah, that's the Redskins' office was from April '67. This is the Gaiety, formerly Central Theater, and Moore's Garden Theater. That picture we saw earlier, January '68. And again, and there's the Saxony restaurant right next to it.
That was the smallest chain in downtown, Jeff. They had one with the half timber next to the Gaiety, and another around the corner where the FBI lived. The two buildings looked exactly alike. Saxony Bar and Grill.
That's was KB Cinema, or rather it's, and that's Alfio's La Trattoria, and that's still in business, but not in that location.
And right across this side of the street was WTTG, the television station that features the show Panorama at noon with Maury.
Hey fans, you see the Collins Funeral Home in that show there? Kate Smith's funeral was held there. The motorcade was about a mile long.
That's right, she was a local girl.
Washington.
Yeah, she was a local girl.
It looks like Matt Cain's on
there. Yeah, this is on 13th. Matt Cain's Bido, Ireland.
Bido, Ireland.
March 1968.
This is Matt Cain's then, right?
Matt Cain's, right, Irish. Was that the first Irish
Yes,
bar?
it was.
It was the first Irish bar in Washington, D.C. Okay.
Where was that? Is that L Street? Where is that?
The 13th Street
13th, right
and Mass.
below Mass.
Yeah.
I lived right around the corner of Selmar Tower.
There's a fire department still there, right next door.
The apartment building on the corner, the DeSoto Apartments, once had more working prostitutes living in it than anyone else.
I'm glad they were working. I hated lazy prostitutes.
After Lenny's Rebel Room stopped being the magnet for the Marines, they used to hang out in Matt Cain's. Oh my God, the band had to play the Marine Corps song a couple times a night. It was scary when they got drunk.
His son's name is Matt Cain. He's a retired DC.
Oh, really? His son, oh, no kidding. His son was Matt Cain, too. I was fortunate to go to Matt Cain's in the 80s. It was very memorable. That's Old Europe, which is still in business on Wisconsin Avenue. And this picture is from April 1968.
They used to run that pharmacy on the corner. They had a lunch counter that stayed open around the clock. Pearson's Pharmacy. That's right. Been in business since the movie.
The other German place was Cafe Mozart. It was in the Harrison Hotel.
It's still there.
It's still there.
Cafe Mozart? This is the 800 block of K Street.
The Boondocks on the right and the Safeway lunch.
Deluxe Grill's on the corner.
Deluxe Grill?
It used to be down on the corner from the Safeway lunch.
Really?
Yeah.
That's the Safeway lunch.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Deluxe was down on the corner. What was that? 8th Street.
Yeah, right by Hopwood's Furniture.
That's
So
it.
this-
Giltenberg's department
Now-
stores across the street.
Yeah.
This that's the art theater.
That was where originally Arena stayed.
Yes.
Separately located. The Hippodrome.
It was the
It's called the
Hippodrome.
Hippodrome, but then they changed it to the art.
The Hippodrome. Was it always that low-lying
Yes.
structure?
It was always a little place.
This is a different building than the one on 9th that was several stories high that had the
No,
art.
not for a long time.
So this is May 1968, probably before it was torn down.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the arena left the Hippodrome, and they took up. They were dark for a year, and then they took up residence over at the old Herrick Brewery for a while. And it was where the old bat room came until they built their permanent home.
So and this is Jack Hunt's, exactly. Jack Hunt's Seafood Restaurant on Pennsylvania Avenue in July '68. Just Pennsylvania, 1700 block of Pennsylvania. Okay, there's Benny's. I'm sorry, Richard's not here, but that's Benny's Rebel Room.
That's after the riots, Jeff.
This is actually, this picture is from July 1968. You're right, Chris. That's from
It was burned out.
They torched DJ Kaufman's men's.
That was a nice store too.
This is the Bistro, October 1968. This is M Street, exactly, 1825 M Street. The sign of the whale is there now. Okay. This is that's La Provençal
The building
restaurant.
next to it, Jeff, was Werdeman's Furniture Shop. It was not changed for 100 years. The Heinrich Mansion was furnished as that. The entire German cabinet makers put all the woodwork in the Heinrich Mansion.
So
It's gone. 20th Street.
this is there's the Redskins building again. April 1969. Here's the Art Theater. This is on 9th Street. This became the Gaiety after the Gaiety closed. And at this point, it was Love is. Yep. This is an adult establishment. This is from July 1970.
Carroll Tavern opened the month Prohibition was lifted. That had been in business since 1933. That tavern.
Really?
Yeah.
Central Liquor was right in the middle.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Astor Haberdashery was a really old men's cloak. They used to buy all their wide lapel suits and the
Virginia ABC people used to write down.
This is Reeves restaurant. This is on July 1969 on F Street. There's the interior of Reeves.
The best cherry pie. Strawberry.
Strawberry.
There's the interior.
Rhubarb. And
It's blue Mary had. Do you remember? You ever lived with your Frisch's big boy that had?
Is that it?
Big strawberry pie.
Okay. You made it. I really want to thank you all once again, and I really particularly want to thank Barbara for coming, representing, of course, Leon Zeiger and Vance Garnett, Mike Baker, Mark Zeidelman, and everybody else. We have some things to, this is great. I obviously could go on and on, but thank you all for coming. And thank you, Vi. Thank
Probably can't come down and we go down there. I'll take cherries on. We go down there. I'll take cherries on. And stuff. I gotta show you something.
I don't remember. It was I would take these chairs and lay on my stomach and fly across the
Okay, back on. Yeah, he played there. Okay, back on. Yeah, he played there.
Roy Clark used to run around here. Roy Clark used to run around here. Guys would go around. When I was a kid, those guys would be stone drunk, and they'd come into, you had the motorcycle guys, they drive the motorcycles into the place. I didn't know who either one of them were, but I wound up going to Chamberlain, which Roy Clark had gone to, and I was playing with music a little bit. You're not as good as Roy. F. Roy Clark. Who the heck? Why did you care about? Okay. Now I went to a Woodward prep with the guy. Well, I got.